Greetings, fellow conquerors, this is darkfireslide, and welcome to another video talking about diplomatic feedback and feature creep here in EU4. In particular, I'm going to be responding to comments made in the last video, the first video of diplomatic feedback, and the idea of feature creep, and discuss some certain topics that people brought up, and I wanted to respond to them directly in video format rather than commenting to about, well, I don't know, about 100 different comments, saying various different things, not all just one different, one sort of thing. Most people liked the video, which I assume means they agree with me, or maybe they just like my voice. I mean, it is a good voice. But I wanted to... shameless self-promotion by Dark. Alright, so the first thing I want to kind of... first of all, I'm going to concede something, which I know rare that somebody, admits that they were wrong on something. And that's on the historical accuracy point that I brought up in the last episode. The idea that a small nation can ally a bigger nation and use that nation to declare an offensive war is, well, pretty unhistorical. There's a reason that mostly large nations succeeded in the real world, and that's because they actually had the resources to man an army, and in the event that they did help out a small nation, they would often take land for themselves, at least as far as I understand it. So, yeah, that was kind of a moot point. At the best, small nations could expect a guarantee from larger nations, and even then, that was usually just to protect their own interests. Little was it out of any sort of altruism or even just hatred of their own, of their rivals. So, that being said, I do apologize for that. The best example I could come up with is the American War of Independence, where the French basically bankrupted themselves trying to help the United States, but even then, that's an independence war. At the same time, people have argued, yeah, why would a bigger nation ever bankrupt itself for a smaller one? Well, in that case, it did happen. I don't think it was particularly common, but it has happened, and one point I do want to bring up is, I don't think the AI always does bankrupt itself fighting in wars. Now, if you intentionally drag them into wars where they're going to become bankrupted, there are long-term ramifications for that. So if, for example, you play a minor in the HRE and you ally France, and you drag France into a war with half the HRE, and you manage to win, but France is deadlocked for the rest of the game, well, you've basically lost a permanent ally that could have been very helpful to you. And I know, who allying France is for noobs, but anyway, that's just a point I wanted to make about that is, yes, you can do that, but if you do, and if you're not smart about the way that you use alliances in either the base game or the Cossacks, really, then you can completely, ruin that country even after just one big war. I mean, getting deadlocked is actually something that happens a lot to the AI, more in recent years than when the game first came out, in my experience. But I'm getting kind of sidetracked. Another thing I wanted to talk about was that somebody proposed a very reasonable change, and I'm sorry I didn't write down your name, because this is a great suggestion. For the Cossacks, I would probably actually try it if this change were made, and that's if they made it so that the amount of favors needed to attack the rival of a country, so for example, playing, the Byzantine example of playing as Byzantium, using Austria to attack the Ottomans because they're rivals, that it should take fewer favors to get a country to get involved in a war against its rival, to portray and I do think that this is historical, the idea of fighting, your rival to significantly weaken them, even if it means giving land to another nation. Now, I understand that most nations probably wouldn't have done that in real life, but then again, in real life, you don't need to take adjacent provinces to your country, even if they're not connected by sea. So, anyway, the point there is that I can see it being historically feasible, even if it didn't really happen historically, if that makes sense. I think that's a better argument, and I hope that you guys can see where I'm coming from on this. So anyway, I think that would be a great change if the amount of favors it would take to get a rival to attack another rival it was, lessened. That would be kind of awesome, and maybe mess around and tweak the rate of favors a bit. But that's kind of one of the issues with the feature creep in general, is Paradox releases an expansion, and then they never really fix the brokenness of some of the features that get released. Great example here. They haven't really rebalanced favors at all. They just said, well, here's the system, just deal with it, and didn't really do anything about it. But then again, I found that not a lot of people really speak up about that. They either go, I love Paradox, and don't get me wrong, I adore Paradox. I think that they're a great company. I think that they make, first of all, my most played game ever out of all my games in my library, and I've played a lot of games, and I play games a lot in general, and so I have Paradox to thank for that. I think they're a fantastic company because of the way they treat their customers, the way they are constantly updating their games, giving out free updates for games years after launch, and with a mission statement to, if it isn't working or isn't the best it can be on release, that they will patch it until it is a great game, or at least, die trying, that sort of attitude, which is awesome. But that being said, it also means that sometimes they release features and they don't go back and fix them because they're trying to release new features that they can make money off of. But I mean, that's just business. I can't really fault them too much for that, given how much they already do with their games, and the fact that EU4 is almost 4 years old now, funnily enough. And the last, let's see, there was another point that I had when it came to the changes. Oh, yes, so a lot of people were saying, like, hey, you can't talk about something that you haven't tried yourself. And I think I can actually disagree on this to an extent. So while I can't say that, like, oh, I have 200 hours of extensive experience with this system, what I can say is that I've watched probably about 200 plus hours of people using this system in Let's Plays, and I've read extensively on the wiki and other sources on how these mechanics work. And they make sense to me. I understand how they work, and if I were to buy the Cossacks today, I could hop right into it and I would understand immediately how it works, because I've, read up on it. That being said, I'm sorry to those who don't think that my opinion is valid because I haven't actually played the Cossacks. I just didn't think it was worth the money, and I didn't like the features it offered, so I didn't buy it, honestly. And, if that offends you, well, I apologize. But at the same time, this is my opinion, and I'm sticking with it, really. And the last thing I want to say is, honestly, it's your choice if you want to play with the Cossacks or not. Like, a lot of people were quick to say, yeah, diplomatic feedback kind of sucks, especially for small nations, but the estates are great. And so, I think it's fair to say that people are pretty divided on the Cossacks. And the last time I checked the Cossacks, which was a decent while ago, it only had about a 67% Steam rating. And Mare Nostrum was even lower, if I recall. So this is definitely a very divisive DLC, much more so than Common Sense, Art of War, or Rights of Man. So I think that it alone speaks volumes about how people feel about it. And anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this discourse. I love talking about EU4 and having these discussions. So, I'm going to continue this feature creep series, talking about more things and probably talking about the upcoming eras mechanics. And we'll have some words to say about that. But that'll be on the next video. So until then, Godspeed, you brave souls, and I'll see you on the next one.